Good morning, everyone. For those of you who do not know me, let me introduce myself. I am Chan Heng Chi. I'm the Honorary Professor, SUTD Honorary Professor attached to the Lee Kuan Yew Center for Innovative Cities. I was the founding director, founding chair of the Lee Kuan Yew Center for Innovative Cities. Now I float between the center, Lee Kuan Yew Center, and HAS, helping HAS to integrate social science with technology. And I think in SUTD, we can do it at a deeper and more profound level. It's an ambition every university is trying, but very hard to achieve. It's the latest buzzword these days. You are here today at the Trending Thoughts seminar series. For those of you from LKYCIC, you've heard me ad nauseum each time I chair this session. The Trending Thoughts seminar was introduced, and I want to remind our own researchers, was introduced to really help researchers in the center and in the university to break out of their silos. It's so easy to get into our own expertise silo, not really knowing what is going on in other disciplines, adjacent fields, and so on. And I thought it would be a good idea to bring everyone together in the center for a start, so that they don't just only consider their projects, but also what are the latest trends in thinking globally and in your discipline. And so we want to kick you out of your comfort zone, basically. We've had quite a few seminars, and we invite distinguished speakers from outside the university. The last time we had someone who was AECOM's Special Sustainability Officer, and he was interested in carbon capture, carbon emissions, and so on. Today, we have Harvey Newell from our center, Professorial Research Fellow. Harvey, you have a whole list of things after your name. I'm not going to say all that. Your researchers know who you are. You're going to speak on why we don't do the right thing, even when we know it. If you were at the Ideas Festival, this is a second run. And if you didn't catch it at the first run, here's your second chance.
Thank you so much, Prof. Chan. So yes, she's right. If you didn't catch my first round of this, it's kind of good because I'm going to stray a little bit from what I said last week during the Ideas Festival. This is the real explanation that I'm going to give, because last week's presentation was more about reporting the project per se. So I didn't dwell too deep into this question. And this is a question that all of us, regardless what's your background, what would you do, or even in your personal life, you have asked yourself many times. Sometimes if you're an architect, you give two designs or to the client, and one is obviously the correct, the better in all sense of the word design, but then the client picked the other one. So you have to wonder, it's so obvious, why did he pick the other one? So it's a very simple, common question, but it's transdisciplinary. It's not an academic question. It's not a disciplinary question. It's just a life question. And you see that I put a scary quote into the right thing, because I was told that why we don't do the right thing is grammatically awkward. But I meant it like that. I didn't want to say why don't we do the right thing. That's the more correct version. But I specifically want to say why we don't do the right thing. This is not English class, so I just leave it to you to see what's the difference between the two phrasing. So here I make it clear that I wanted to stress do the right thing. Right, okay. So maybe I'll just start by, if you are warmed up enough, right, to ask the members of the audience here, why do you think? Do we have any idea or any hypothesis, like why many of us don't do the right thing, even we know that we should do it? Any volunteers? No, not enough warmed up. But it's okay. Let us do this step by step. But think about this question. Think about how you would answer this question. Oops. How come? Oh, okay, sorry. It's the other arrow. So let me start generally and broadly. When we think about doing the right thing, I kind of think of it in more general terms as doing the right thing equals the ethical, morally correct thing. They are not always the same, but for the sake of this presentation, for the purpose of this presentation, those are details which are not so important. So if we consider ethical actions, moral actions, there are ethical actions which are contested, which means a group of people strongly believe in it, a group of people do not believe in it very strongly, equally strongly. So these are contested ethical actions or beliefs like euthanasia, abortion. And ethical actions can have different degrees of positive consequences for self and society. So that's another way we can think about ethical actions differently. And quite different from the consequence, the effort to perform certain ethical actions are more onerous than other ethical actions. That's also reality, a fact of life. But I want to point out that it doesn't mean that if it's more difficult to perform, the positive outcome will be greater. There's no necessary link in that. And finally, well, not finally, this is the second to last point. Ethical behavior or thinking associated with certain acts are usually learned. In other words, they are not innate. You do not come prepared or born with certain attitudes and certain ideas about ethical beliefs. So, oh yeah, that was my last one. But anyway, look at this picture here. Do you recognize what is this depicting? Surely you know this. Airport, yes. Which part of this airport? Baggage collection. And can you describe what's happening here? People are waiting to collect their baggage, right? And everyone is crowding near the baggage belt. As opposed to crowding near the baggage belt, what is the alternative action they could have done? Or you think this is a normal behavior? You do that as well. I do not, because I was standing at distance taking a picture. Okay, let this example stew in your head a little bit. I'll come back to it. This is the last one I said, okay. But, you know, I want to tell you that actually a lot of ethical acts that we perform are very ordinary, mundane, even unthinking. So what I'm suggesting today, the framework that I'm discussing, right, doesn't apply to contested ethical belief. In other words, I'm thinking of a framework where we actually know that we should do this thing, but we do not do. So that cancels out contested actions, right? Because it's something that a society is still a bit conflicted about what is the morally good thing to do. So the framework doesn't apply to that. The framework is also agnostic about the consequences, the positive consequences, whether it's higher or lower. It's also very agnostic about the effort to perform the acts. So these are the baseline assumptions that you have to at least temporarily fly back with me with it. You know, you have to accept those assumptions. So I'm talking about rewiring the ethical mind, rewiring how we think about performing ethical acts. So there are some basic tenets. Some of them, when I'm listing them out, will be very counterintuitive, but you just bear with me, okay? This is very easy, right? You can accept this, right? Acting ethically is different from thinking ethically. I know it's such an obvious point to make, but sometimes we forget. We have people who sit whole day thinking about acting ethically, and at the end of the day, feeling so accomplished. But that's not acting ethically. You have done nothing but think, right? So thinking ethically is different. Here we are concerned about acting ethically. Okay, now I'm going to stranger waters. Oops, what happened? What did I do? I don't know what I did. Something went wrong. I'm sure I didn't do anything. Okay, it's listen to perfect playlist of gaming. I'm not a gamer by any stretch. Okay, so let's go back to the second point. Now we are going to deeper waters a little bit. The ethical value of an act is innately derivable. And it's not the outcome, and not outcome dependent or externally validated. Okay, let me give you a simple example here. Let's say you see, okay, you are coming through the door and someone is behind you. You hold the door for this person, right? This act in and of itself is a good act, right? You don't do it expecting some certain outcome or being externally validated. You don't hold the door for the person, and if the person don't say thank you, you don't think, this is not an ethical act for me to do. They are separate things, right? So this is what this point is trying to say. The ethical value of an act is innately derivable. It cannot be dependent on the outcome. So whether this person thank you, you have done the ethical act, right? You don't need this person to externally validate what you do in order for the act to become ethical. So far, so good, right? Okay, so now going deeper, it goes deeper into how unintuitive it may sound to you. A completed ethical act is the outcome of the relationship between the individual and the act in the present moment. So holding the door like this, the relationship, the ethical value is in and of itself here and now. So let's say, using the same example, I want to hold the door for someone, but then I think, hey, but I've never held a door for someone before, so let's not do it. That's irrelevant noise. The act of holding the door is in and of itself ethical. It doesn't matter that this is the first time you're doing it, you've never done it before, or you don't intend to do it in the future. All those are irrelevant to the present moment, right? So the completed ethical act is the outcome of the relationship between the individual and the act in the present. So all this in italics, there are important points for you to remember as we go along. And here is the generous answer to the question, why don't we do the right thing even we know it? Because there are many things that stabilize this relationship, point number 3. And that is the reason why we fail to act consistently ethically. I think you are still a bit woolly, but it's okay. We will go through this a little bit more detail. So let's go into detail some of the points I just said in the earlier slide. So the ethical value of an act is innately derivable and not the outcome of something else, and is not to be externally validated. So what are some of these external validators that we are talking about? Sometimes we look at a certain act, right? We know we should do it, but then there are a lot of questions swirling in our heads. So these are all the external validators. So for instance, outcome-derived ethicalness would be questions like, well, I can do this, but only if it works, it serves a larger goal. Or we can say, and this is very common, it's very common to incentivize people to do ethical acts. So one of the other very popular validators will be, well, only if it's supported or I'm rewarded for it. Reward doesn't necessarily mean monetary reward. It can be recognition, social recognition. Another is a little bit like seeking social approval, right? So sometimes we think about the act and we think we should only do it if other people approve of it. Right, this is a social proving validator. Only if I see other people do it, then I do it. And this is a very common validator and the most subjective, I would say, and most shifting. So sometimes we feel that I know I should do it, but I'm not ready, I'm tired, I'm this, I'm that. So the reasons is drawn from within yourself. And you can see why this is such a like a joker card, right? It's a get out of jail free card for not doing an act. Because you can always convince yourself, I'm not ready for it, I'm tired, maybe the next day or whatever. So all these are what we call validators because they take us away from what is the focus of the present moment, which is our relationship with that act. All these are, well, they are important, but not in a way that reduces the ethical value of the act. So, to repeat, all these questions, they are valid to some extent, and I will show you in what cases are they valid, but in no circumstances would they change the ethicalness of the act in question. If you think through these questions, you will see what I mean. All these questions we ask ourselves time and again, but none of these questions actually change the ethical value of the act. It doesn't. So, and let's go deep dive into another one. Acting ethically is different from thinking ethically. A completed ethical act is the outcome of the relationship between the individual and the act in the present. So the framework that I'm trying to persuade you is to think ethically in the moment, at the present moment. So if you look at the box, right, acting ethically is often time constrained. Again, the example of the door. There's probably an ethical window of 0.5 seconds for you to decide to hold the door or not decide to hold the door. So if you choose not to, well, you did not complete the ethical act. The opportunity was there, you did not do it. So be it. Not a problem. Hopefully next time you will do it. So this is a question of thinking, but you must think fast. For many ethical acts, the window is very, very short, right? So this is the background again. The framework also suggests that you treat each ethical act as standalone in the present. So again, to reiterate, it doesn't matter if you have never done it before or you are not even thinking about doing this all the time in the future. All it matters is that you do it now because the ethical window opened for you. Okay? So the point is what I just said, ethical acts are not future nor past path dependent. They are not externally validated. So why we don't do the right thing? When the relationship between the individual and the act in the present ethical window is destabilized, that explains why we don't do the right thing, even though we know it. So the question, of course, follows: what caused this destabilization? It's the validators, it's the external thing that we keep thinking about, right? That give us an excuse, a license not to act. And this is a very pernicious, dangerous kind of thinking. Why? Because just now I just gave you an example of validators, thinking that we have swirling in our head, but there are many, many of such examples. Why is this dangerous? It's because you can keep recycling and reusing all these validators. Let's say, for instance, motivation to act ethically through monetary incentives. It's possible because Singapore has done it before. Let's say for recycling, it's always the strategy to encourage people to act ethically, that is to recycle, is always to incentivize. Incentivize can mean giving them a little bit of money or making sure that they get some financial returns. This is all good. I mean, it's a motivator, but it's problematic when you think that at a certain life stage, right, it no longer becomes a motivator. But maybe when you're younger, a little bit of money is very good to you. So that will be a positive motivator. But once you're older and you realize that, hey, this is like nickels and dimes, I don't need this anymore. What happens is you stop the ethical act because the motivator becomes the reason why you do the act, not the fact that the act is ethical in and of itself. And that is the dangerous thing, because you can go through a laundry list of all these things. Maybe when you are young, you are let's say not so busy, you can afford the time to recycle, and all the conveniences that help you make recycling convenient appeals to you, it motivates you. But when you are busier, no amount of convenience given to you will make you recycle because you still need to put in some effort. And that becomes the breaking point. And if you go down the list, there are so many of these reasons you can give yourself, and they are good reasons. I'm not saying they're bad, they're realistic reasons, but they all serve the same purpose of destabilizing the relationship you have with the individual act of recycling. I must say that my background is a bit sidetracked a bit. I've been thinking about this issue for many, many years through my own research, principally two research. One is on recycling behavior, and the other is on vegetarianism, food choices. And this is what I found very, very interesting, very, very early on. So the first ideas of this research was just quite a number of years ago. And I interviewed many people who are recyclers, many who are committed, many who are committed for a while and then kind of backslide. So I remember very clearly one lady, I still remember where she lives, in somewhere in Bukit Merah, in one of those newer flats. And she was adamant. She was so determined that the government has got recycling all wrong, because she says that we shouldn't make it more convenient, we shouldn't incentivize, we should take the effort to make people see that recycling act itself is the only correct thing to do, the moral thing to do. We don't need anything else. So even then, I was a bit taken aback because I was not developing all this yet. You know, I was thinking surely motivating people through other means is good. But through the years, I always recall what she says. If I remember who she is, I go back and thank her, because that stuck with me for years and years and years. And I finally saw the clarity of her words. Any motivators is problematic because a person's life circumstance will change such that what used to be motivating has no effect anymore. And we go through an endless list of this. Good motivator fails, another motivator. It takes us further and further away from the relationship between the act and ourselves. So it is the same with vegetarianism or food diet choices. I found that, you know, there are typical reasons why people decide to turn vegetarianism, to turn to a vegetarian diet. One of the more popular one is for health reasons. So you're motivating yourself to become vegetarian because of an external motivator. You think that it's healthier, which actually is not necessarily so, but doesn't matter. That's another whole story. So this is an example of a very unstable motivator. Once someone feels, I think I'm sufficiently healthy now, that motivator fails to sustain your vegetarian diet. Some other people will say that, you know, I am turning vegetarian because of environmental reasons. The problem with this as a motivator is climate change itself is a complex issue. It has multiple cause and effect, and it is the most destabilizing as motivator. Because one day you may decide, yeah, this is all for environment, but how about I go back to eating meat, but I don't turn on the aircon. So there's a lot of internal bargaining, which again, the end effect is that you move away from what is the ethical core of not consuming meat. So I found that the most committed vegetarians are the ones who have a very simple, fixed ethical core. You can guess what it is, right? Okay, maybe not. So I'll just tell it to you. Those vegetarians who are committed and sustain the diet are the ones who say that, well, I'm vegetarian because I don't think it's right to kill animals. that is a simple, it is a motivator, but it attaches itself to the ethical core of vegetarianism. So in my study, I found that long-term vegetarian, they are all driven by this idea. In fact, this is not so much a motivator as identifying the ethical core of the act. So whether you become healthy or not healthy, whether the climate change for the better or worse, this belief in not killing animals, therefore I do not eat animals, is the most simple core message of the ethical act itself. So it won't change. So those those who believe in this, who see the ethical act in this manner of not consuming meat, they sustain their practice. They know it and they do it continuously. And this is the same regardless gender, age, religious affiliation, and so on and so forth, because they cut out all the noise and focus on the ethical value itself. For vegetarianism, it is the belief that it's wrong to kill animals. So that's a sidetrack, okay? So the problem is with all these validators, right? It causes destabilization. And with that, it moves us away more and more from the ethical value of the act itself. Okay, let's go back to this again. This is the, now I'm going through a series of examples, thought experiments, if you like. They're all realistic thought experiments to illustrate what I've just said. I know it's very heavy, so we'll do it by examples. So this is the baggage belt bystanders example. Okay, now I think you're sufficiently warm, right? Tell me what is happening here. Anyone? People are crowding at the belt, right? If you are observant enough in this belt, right, there's always a darker shade area that's probably about a meter and a half or 2 meters, which is a nudge for people to stand away from the belt. Because if everyone crowds in the belt, nobody actually is better off. Do you know when your belt is coming out? Of course you don't. So you could be standing there. I wanted to like anonymize this lady here, but I forgot. So yeah, this picture was taken about I think 4:52 p.m. Sorry, 3:52 p.m. and 4:13, right? She was still standing there. So she was effectively standing near the, I have evidence, but I didn't want to put more pictures here. So what happens is a lot of people, they just stand there and they wait. And then people who's back calm have to, literally fight through an army and then retrieve their bag. This is a scenario which is very simple, and it doesn't have big consequences or big effort, but it is a perfect illustration of why we know what we should do, but we don't do it. So in this case, if everyone stands a bit further, everyone is better off. But why do you think there are people who stand? If you are someone who stands like this, right? Please volunteer yourself and tell me the reason, because I don't. Well, you're also correct, yes.
Because it's really common in my culture to do this thing, which really irritates me usually. And people, I asked so many people at the airport because I was just interested, and they tell that it's faster. They will take their luggage faster. And the problem here is that because they're making this army, as you said, you as someone who wants to sit behind and just wait for your luggage, you cannot even see if your luggage
Yes.
coming or not.
Yes.
So you are actually like, they make you stand with them.
Yes.
You don't have any other choice.
Yes. Well, two reasons why it's not correct for them to think that it's faster, because it is not. Well, in some explanation, right, in their head, I can see why they think it's faster. Because they are thinking in the scenario, if everyone is standing in front of me and I have to butt through an army to get it, then it slows me down. So in practice, there could be that kind of thinking going on. But at the end of the day, I want to suggest that the fast or slow that we're talking about is a matter of 2-3 seconds. But this 2-3 seconds adds up if everyone do it like this. So this is a scenario where it just makes sense for everyone to just stand a bit behind. I'm super annoyed. One of these days, I'm just going to be screaming at them, but I try to, let it go. But if you see me in the papers, right, in social media, right, please forgive me, or please say something good for me, that I'm at my breaking point to understand why people do this. In fact, I think there was not a couple of times, 2-3 times ago, I just said very loudly to myself, yeah, standing closer will make your back come faster. I think some of you who have gone overseas with me maybe have heard me say this. I spoke it aloud to hopefully joke people to thinking, yeah, it doesn't. So why am I doing this? But in Singapore's explanation, it could be what we call kiasuism. You see everyone doing it, you want to do it like this also. But that's not a good explanation. So the question is, why do I stand apart when everyone is still doing it like this? Because I identify the ethical act in the act itself. I do not care about social proving. I do not care about the consequences. I only know that this is the right thing to do, and I do it. So if enough people think like this, hopefully, the situation resolves itself. By standing aside a bit further, the beauty of this example is that I'm not really inconveniencing myself any more than if I were to stand nearer. And this is one of those examples where the outcome is immediately visible. The next time I go overseas, I'm just going to hang around and do like a whole video of how long it takes for the baggage of these people to come out. I want scientific proof. I already know it, but I just want to be stronger in the evidence. So this example of the baggage, yes.
What is practical?
Yes.
Not what is ethical.
Yes.
It just makes good sense.
Yes.
To stand back. But what if I crowd around and I help someone pull the bag out? Does one ethical act, in your terms, negate my unethical act of standing close to the?
No. So it doesn't. It's not a kind of bartering system where one positive act.
Say so.
The framework that I'm going to suggest says so, because the more of such things you introduce to a simple act, right, the more it drives you away from what is the right thing as an individual you can do. Because these are what I call, validator creep. And it's very easy to think of something like this, which may happen, which could have happened, but make it such that you excuse yourself not to, stand away from the belt. But in this case, you can clearly observe that no one is doing such things. So maybe if in the context where there are people actually doing this, you can modify what you do in that moment. That's fair. But this example I chose was because it's very clearly that everyone was just standing around. Actually, at first I thought this guy is an airport employee, but he's not. He was also waiting for his luggage because I thought he was helping people, but it's not. So, yes, some of these acts we can see them as they are a little bit of an overstretch. We call it the moral or ethical act. They are just expected or practical act or sensible, commonsensical act. But I want to suggest that for those acts, it also fits the framework. It's just a matter of two choices or a few choices of where you can act, which is the best option, right? The best meaning good, ethical, morally correct. Right. So in this case, there are only two choices, right? Standing near the belt or standing apart from the belt. And most of us intuitively know what is the good act. And this is another point that I want to highlight that a lot of the things that we do, right, we already know what is the good thing to do. In fact, many of us unconsciously do the right thing. If we see a stray litter on the floor, we'll pick it up. Do we seek validation for this? No, of course not. So why do we do it? Because it's just the right thing to do. So we are able to do such things, but granted, these are low effort, low stakes kind of ethical good acts to do. So this framework tries to scale this up, if possible, by identifying what is the core. How can we make sure that we keep doing the right thing consistently? So there are many reasons why people choose to still stand like that. The person at the back suggests is a cultural thing. A cultural thing is one of those validating reasons, which again takes us away from what is good about the correct act. And these are some of the things. I think for this example, most people do that unthinkingly, but if you force them to think, right, they will think maybe point number 3, only if others do it too. And there's a very established psychological principles why people do this. You just follow the crowd. But following the crowd doesn't mean it's the correct thing to do. And there are many psychological experiments which shows this very clearly. The bystander effect, for example. Why, ironically, when there are many people witnessing a person in distress, the person in distress is less likely to help. It's very counterintuitive, right? As opposed to when you are one person witnessing someone in distress. But the reason is the bystander effect. People are looking at cues for what other people are doing, social proving. And they are not focusing on the act itself, that it is the ethical thing for me to help this person. Doesn't matter what other people are doing or seeing or whatever. It doesn't even matter if I'm alone with this person, I will help. So in this case, actually, no matter what individual chooses, even if they're standing close to the belt, if I would ask them, do you think it's better for you to more correct for you to stand apart, away from the belt? I would say most of them will actually agree. But their agreement will come with a but. They say, yeah, I agree, but then all this comes in. So the ethical act of standing away from the belt is generally not disputed, even for those who do not follow this rule. Okay, another example, the lipstick guy. By the way, all these are AI created imagery. The rest of the illustrations you see are all following different styles of Japanese manga. If you recognize this style, very good. This is I cannot remember what this style is, but you see the different styles. So this is a lovesick guy. See, he's proposing. He's a little bit pudgy, holding a cigarette. The roses are kind of withering. But the pretty haughty lady says, marry me. Well, only if you're ultra fit, because he's not really fit. You have $500,000 in cash and you quit smoking in 3 years. That's what the lady told him. What are the ethical acts mentioned here? Trying to get yourself fitter is an ethical thing to do to yourself. It's the correct thing to do. It's a moral obligation to the self. Well, having cash, I guess nobody thinks it's a wrong thing to do. It's not so morally ambiguous. Having a safety net of money is always the right thing to do. And quit smoking is even clearer, right? Nobody, even smokers think that they should quit smoking. That's how unambiguous it is. So these are all the ethical acts mentioned here. So let's assume this example, the lovesick guy say, good, 3 years, I can do this. Let me quit smoking, let me become fit, I'll run, I'll do whatever, and I'll start saving money. So that's what the man did. Is that what would you have done? Probably, right? I mean, if you really want to marry this girl, that acts as your motivation. But you see what the framework that I'm suggesting to you is that is the danger point already. Because you are basing the fact that you should get fitter, you should have more safety nets of money, and you should quit smoking because of something else. And that something else is marriage. This beautiful blonde hair girl. Okay. But let me ask you a question. What if at the 18th mark means the halfway point of this 3 years deadline, the couple breaks up? We don't even need to know why they break up. Let's assume that the girl found another ready-made guy, richer, healthier, not smoking, no ill vices whatsoever. So anyway, they break up. What should the man do? Remember, he's already halfway mark in this 3 years journey to get himself fitter, richer, and quit smoking. Well, most of us will say, keep going at it. You know, why do you stop? Because these are all good things that you're doing. Doesn't matter if she broke up with you. But there are some of us who will understand why the man stopped. Why would we think that it's understandable? Well, most of us will say, well, this man lost the main motivation for doing all these things. So I can understand why he feels so demoralized and he wants to stop. But the framework I'm suggesting will tell you that the better reason for this person to stop is to not attach external validators to the clear ethical acts that he's doing. So he should continue because these 3 acts are ethical in and of themselves. Doesn't matter the motivation, doesn't matter the ultimate goal. If he persists and at the 3-year mark, he really achieved and the girl really marries him, that's a bonus. It doesn't make the ethical acts that he has done for the last 3 years better or worse. Okay, I hope you see where this example is leading. The problem with external motivation like this is it tries to misdirect our attention when all we need is to direct our attention to the act itself. So in this case, we will say that we will advise the man to continue because these acts are ethical in and of themselves. It doesn't matter whether the girl is going to marry or not. So yes, we can recognize motivation, but motivation cannot take the place of the ethical value of the act. Once that happens, right, you will see all kinds of eventualities will break the man from continuing to perform these acts. So we offer a better explanation. We don't just say that you should continue because you're doing the right thing. And we will disagree from people who say that, well, he should stop because he lost the motivation. Because at the get-go, we already will say that those kinds of motivations should be disentangled from the ethicalness of the act themselves. Okay, 3 guys and 1 exam. This is another manga style, if you recognize this. So the premises of this thought experiment is this. Imagine there's a big exam which everyone knows and agree that we require 30 days of studying to do well. So the first student studies for 30 days, very studious, very hardworking. The second student, the one with the earphones, well, kind of skips a day, study a day, skips a day, whatever, not as consistent. And the third student, a little bit like me, sleeps the whole month away and studies the day before the exam. So my question to you is this. How would you describe each student? So, according to the framework, we will say that each day of studying of any of the 3 persons is the good, correct thing to do in and of itself. So the person who studies 30 days, very good, 30 days of continuously doing good. The inconsistent second student, yeah, some days good, some days bad, doesn't matter. He achieved what he achieved for that day. But for the last student, the only thing we can say is that for the night before, he has done the correct thing. But in this case, we can go a little bit further to criticize this student. Why? Because he knows that it's a 30 days of studying, but he left it to the last day. even though this doesn't negate the ethical act of studying that day, the day before exam, we are already quite sure of the consequences, the outcome. The outcome is such that he probably will do very badly for the exam. And that is a criticism we can level on this student. But this criticism doesn't negate the fact that he did at least study that one day. So that in itself is the ethical act. So this example, I want to show you that the framework doesn't stop us from criticizing certain things, but the criticism is separate from the ethical value of the act itself. So this is what I suggest here for this example. And then one guy and three decisions, another different manga style. So the scenario is this. You're a person, you witness an elderly person who fall down. There's three scenarios. One scenario is the guy rushes immediately to help the elderly man. Scenario two, the guy considers momentarily, ignores, and continues walking away. Scenario three is the interesting one. The guy considers momentarily, ignores, continues to walking, but after half a block, decides to return and help the man. These are all very likely scenarios. Very clearly, scenario two is a missed opportunity to act ethically, right? Because the person ignores and goes. And the first scenario is, well, he did take advantage of this ethical window and acted correctly and ethically to help the man. But the third scenario is interesting. Do you think that by kind of having a lag time in helping the man, his ethical act of helping the man is diminished or less than the person in scenario one? Okay, what I'm suggesting to you is that it doesn't. The act of helping the man is still ethical in and of itself, no more, no less than the first scenario. But in this case, we can go on to criticize the man in the third scenario on another charge, a different kind of criticism, which is that the delay has caused unnecessary suffering for the elderly man. That is a criticism on the consequences. It doesn't negate the fact that he still did the right ethical act. So I know this is probably the most contentious point that I'm making. So to elaborate a little bit, any consequence due to his delay does not invalidate the ethicalness of helping the elderly man. However, as the outcome can be verified instantly, we can say that, well, it would be better if guy number three, right, help immediately, because the delay probably will cause unnecessary suffering to the elderly man. So we can criticize him on that front, but that criticism has nothing to do with the fact that he has done the ethical act. So those are separate things. Why we need to maintain a strict separation between consequence and the ethical act itself is because once we introduce consequence as a legitimate validating factor, again, it opens up a whole host of ifs and buts. If we conflate consequence with the ethical value of the act itself, it will be very easy for us to think, I'm not doing this because, yeah, it's only going to be this effect. Or I should do that because it has this much effect. All these are unverifiable in the head thinking. Okay, so we should move away from this. It's considered, but in a different level. It doesn't negate the ethical value and the need to perform the act. So now you come to some questions. I want to unpack the framework for you. And these are in the form of questions. So you might be thinking, well, isn't this really about self-discipline and willpower? Nothing different, right? Well, no. There is some degree of self-discipline and willpower, and that pertains to how you educate the mind to not use external validators to change the ethical status of the act. That requires a little bit of willpower, but not so much. You'll be surprised, again, I echo what I said earlier. Many of the acts that we do are ethically unambiguous. It doesn't require us to have some kind of internal struggle. It's very low effort. Even recycling, we know it's an ethical behavior. It's not as big an effort as we imagine it to be. And later I'll show you why this is so. If you, at some point, this is the column there, at some point in time, you feel that you require a lot of discipline to do what is ethically correct, then you have to ask yourself this question: are you relating to the act in and of itself, this moment, this individual act, or are you imagining in your head a lifetime of performing this act? That imagination is the stress that gives you the idea that, oh, I need a lot of self-discipline, I need a lot of willpower. So, as I said that, in other words, there's nothing onerous in picking up a little when you see it. But if your mind starts to question, do I need to do this every single time for the rest of my life? Suddenly, a simple act becomes very onerous. It suddenly makes you think that, wow, I need a lot of willpower and self-discipline to do this. But all these are in your head thinking. If we focus on directly the act that needs to be done, it's not onerous at all. It doesn't require self-discipline. It doesn't require that much willpower. So the one simple act suddenly becomes so demanding that you feel that you need such great discipline or even a transformation of yourself to do it. But all these are external validators, destabilizing the relationship between you and the act. So I continue on with some research on smoking cessation about self-discipline and willpower. There are parallels between smoking cessation process and ethical acts, committing ethical acts. They both work best when the attention is focused on the here and now. Future-oriented hard goals, right, ironically stresses or disincentivizes smoking cessation as well as acting ethically, respectively. They confuse the ethical correctness of the act in the present moment. So let's look at the box here. The paradox of hard targets as motivators. Across a host of smoking cessation research, right, it's consistently shown that setting hard targets, such as I need to quit when my baby is born, I need to quit before Christmas, I need to quit before my next birthday. Such hard targets do not increase the success of smoking cessation. You think, hey, why not? This is a very good motivator. But the human mind is very different because setting hard targets actually increases stress. It magnifies the effort that you need to do because it becomes a be-all or end-all kind of goal for people. On the contrary, success is higher when smoking cessation is broken down to the minutest scale, such as, I will not lead up for this present urge that I have. I will go 3 hours without lighting a cigarette. I can go 1 day without smoking a cigarette. This requires much less willpower than the imaginary hard targets that we impose on ourselves. So this example is very interesting because it shows that some of the things that we associate with performing ethically is actually not borne out by evidence. It may seem counterintuitive, but the mind works in such a way that if you imagine yourself to, let's say for a smoking cessation example, if you have a craving and you want to resist the craving to smoke, and your mind keeps telling you, must I keep fighting this craving every single time for the rest of my life? That urge becomes magnified. It becomes unmanageable. Therefore, you think that I need so much self-discipline to do it. When if you just focus directly on the here and now to this one urge and manage it, do it, then it's more accomplishable. Another question that people might ask is, well, does this framework disincentivize working towards a larger moral good? No, it doesn't. But it rejects the idea that ethical action must be motivated by a future outcome. A future outcome that is either imagined, uncertain, unverifiable. And the longer this future outcome is, right, the more we are wary of it. Because if the time runway is very, very far away, so many more things can come in to affect your decision to act ethically here and now. It's just logic here at this point. But we do not reject the existence of long-term moral goals. So it is not anti-future. It is not anti-cumulative. It just resists letting the future become the validator of present ethics. Because once we allow that, we open up a floodgates of excuses. Climate change is a prime example. If you set a goal to say that, you need to do this because in 2030, if we don't do this, something will happen. In 2050, something will happen. Sometimes people will buy it and say, yeah, this is good motivation, I want to do it. Other times, maybe that day they come across a news article that kind of gives doubts to this projection. Then it becomes very shaky, right? They'll say, I don't think so. Maybe it's not really leading to where it should be leading. So the further the goal, the more complicated the goal, with more cause and effect, the more likely it is to destabilize the act in the present moment. So this is just the elaboration. So we can allow future objective. We cannot allow the future objective to become the primary justification for present behavior. Because when that happens, ethical action becomes conditional on expected outcomes, on incentives, on so many other things. And any changes in those other things, right, will derail the ethical act in the present moment. Okay, another criticism is this. You have been talking about this, but I feel this is so clinical, so I'm feeling. It may seem like this, right? But what we are checking against is sentimental inflation. Right? If you perform something and you want to feel good, that's fair. Okay, it's yourself. You can deal with your emotions, whatever. But if you do this expecting to be always rewarded with some kind of feel-good, fuzzy feeling, that is when we become wary. Because, as I said earlier, human changes. Sometimes we, that kind of fuzzy, warm feeling from performing good is an addiction. You want more of it. You want it in greater dosages. So we are wary if we use this to motivate to act ethically. And really, the bottom line is that it rejects the idea that all ethical acts require some kind of feeling good as a necessary outcome. Let me talk about the example of donating blood, right? Again, studies on blood donors have found that while altruism and wanting to help, feeling good, are common motivation, regular donors are driven more by trust in health institutions, cordial and competent staff, and a smooth process in their blood donation. But so these are clinical. I'm feeling they're just very process-based motivators. So regular blood donation research shows that an ethical act can be deeply humane without being emotionally every time it is performed. And this is the case. If you talk to regular blood donors, you ask, hey, how do you feel about donating blood? They say, like that, no? They don't get, wow, I'm saving the world, that kind of feeling, that kind of euphoria every time. So in that sense, this framework is realistic. It doesn't deny the sentimental effects of acting good, but it resists the idea that it must always make you feel good. This is another style, sorry. I'm having fun with the image generation. Okay, now this is a very valid question. What about individuals who knowingly, persistently chooses to act less ethically? There are people like this, okay? To be fair, not such people, right? Recalcitrant people, no ethical belief system can eliminate such recalcitrant without any guardrails. But different from this other system, right? I suggest that we are only interested in these people, not because we wish to reform them. No, it's nothing like this, because this framework allows them to continuously choose the wrong thing to do. But we are concerned. We are concerned because if there are enough of such people left unchecked, right, what seems like an obvious moral act become very ambiguous. Remember, one of my earlier premises is that this works best for acts in which there's general consensus that it's the morally good thing to do. But if enough of these people come mess up the system, right, what seems to be a morally good act become ambiguous. You see in China, there's a phrase called touching the porcelain 碰瓷, which is you help someone, but the someone is actually a scammer. You say, hey, you push me down, you hurt me, I'm going to sue you. So enough of these scammers have existed such that the conventional, the normal act of helping someone becomes so ambiguous. That is where we are concerned. We don't wish to reform these people, but we need guardrails to make sure that these people do not change the climate of moral ambiguity. So we need, society needs a guardrail. We need a punitive system to punish these people if we see it. There's nothing wrong with it, all for it, you know, but we should not be afraid, we should not be forced to act ethically for fear of punishment. That is a different thing altogether. And this framework doesn't call for that. Okay, this is just so if a society has degenerated to a state where ethical acts become increasingly contested, then this framework actually, along with all other moral frameworks, will fail. However, okay, this is, however, tantalizing last slide that I'm going to share with you. However, this framework does something that all other ethical frameworks cannot do. For the last slide, I will come back to this point. So let me sum up a little bit. You know, external validators, earlier I said that they serve a purpose, right? But the purpose they serve doesn't affect the ethical status of the act. So the purpose of these validators are very practical. They tell a person whether you can actually do the act or not. Whether you can do it doesn't affect the ethical status of the act. So for instance, if you witness a child fall into the pool, of course the ethical act is to, in this short window, save the child. But if you cannot swim, why would you do it? It's crazy for you to do it. So you need to think quickly and you know, confidently, what are the things that require in order for you to perform this act. If you cannot swim, you're making things worse, because instead of child waiting to be rescued, there are two persons waiting to be rescued. So this is the importance of external validators. They actually shape the quality of the ethical act, but they cannot tell us or change the ethical value of the act itself. So these are two different considerations. Okay. So what this framework does, it makes ethical action practicable under uncertainty and uneven conditions, because it resists importing all these considerations into the individual act. So the example of climate change, right? It introduced so many uncertainties, so many legitimate questions that it downgrades the ethical value of the act for some people, and they stop doing it. So what we do is we target the mechanism that makes the ethics become conditional. That is, anything that destabilizes the relationship between you and the act which is very unambiguously the morally good thing to do. Also, we acknowledge, this was my earlier point, that we need societal scale guardrails to punish bad faith gamers. So not to really punish them, not that we want to reform them, but to maintain ethical clarity. If you want, this is like a 5-point simple, succinct points that we're making. Ethics happen in the present. The ethical claim we must answer to is the one that is unfolding before our eyes, not an imaginary one, not a future one, and we should not be held back by what we have done before. Do not confuse moral thinking with moral action. treat each ethical act as complete in itself. This is a very important point because I think a lot of the reasons why we don't do it consistently is because we imagine that we have to do it for the entire rest of our life. And that makes the simple act become so onerous. So long-term goals may guide direction, but it should never validate the ethical legitimacy of the act in the present moment. What is performing consistencies? Consistently? Ethical life is sustained not by any grand commitments, but the steady completion of acts in each window of opportunity that presents itself. Okay, remember I promised you the last slide. This is the last slide. Ethics of the unfolding present. The lowest denominator. What is this showing? This is showing a world of dystopia. Everything is gone. Maybe this guy doesn't even know whether there are other human beings still alive. So what is morally good becomes unbelievable. The usual rules don't stand anymore. You may be punished for doing good, you may be rewarded for doing bad. So everything is gone crazy in the dystopia. But here the young man still did something. He sees a rabbit, scary looking rabbit, hurt, and he goes on to help the rabbit. So in the dystopia where society has gone rogue, where morality becomes solid, when you're rewarded for doing the wrong thing and punished for doing the right thing, what happens to this framework? Well, it may be the last link to what it means to be humane, right? Because in this case, the man attempts to help the rabbit, not because of incentives, because you may be punished for doing this, not because he craves for social recognition, because he may be the only human being alive, and not because it fits into some moral future goal, because the future may be ending today. But because in that moment, in that present, it is the only ethical thing that he recognized he should do, and he does it. And that's what makes it human. Okay, so do the right thing in the unfolding present. I'm proposing a practice that stabilizes person-act relationship under changing conditions. I think we have time for questions. This is my very, very last slide. I know you have probably a lot of
Questions, please? Yes.
What if, thank you for the talk.
Is there a microphone?
Thank you. Just wanted to understand, how would you make a decision if there are two things that requires your ethical action, and how do you decide this is a bigger focus area compared to the other? So how do you make that decision? That's your framework.
Yeah.
Interested.
So, yes, that's a very good question. But this framework works best if the right decision is unambiguously clear. And you might think, doesn't that exclude many things? But it doesn't. If we think about it, actually a lot of the things that we do, right, it's quite clear which is the right thing we should do. In morally conflicted scenarios, right, this framework doesn't work as well. But it can inform, but it's not meant to be adjudicator of what is morally good. It is best for acts which there is wide consensus that is the right thing to do. So you see all my examples are very clear, morally clear. See a child drowning, the morally good thing is to save the child if you can, right? And so it's starting, quitting smoking and all this. All these are very clear examples. And some of these examples, the morally good thing to do is so unambiguous that even people who are smoking, they agree that they should smoke. So these are kind of the parameters that we are working with. And yes, it does exclude some of the things that are morally conflicted, like abortion rights, euthanasia. But to be honest, there are surprisingly few of these examples. So this does well with the majority of the decisions we make, the mundane ethical things that we encounter day to day. Thank you for the question. By the way, I've been feeding generative AI a lot of content about this. And now, right, it's able to answer whatever question you throw out. Truly, I've let Sarah experiment this generative AI, and it really does answer everything. Yes.
I'm going to ask question if there are no questions.
Sorry, answer ethically or just answer?
Answer. No, the answer in the framework that it has.
The floor is yours, actually. I will say, I won't ask if you have questions, please. Yes, there are a couple of questions, please. 1, 2. The guy at the back.
I have two questions actually. First, I have two questions actually. First is that because much of what you have shared is based on like anecdotal case studies, examples, scenarios. So how much of these theories are based on, say, empirical research in based on, for example, how people act or behave in certain scenarios. I know you mentioned earlier that you previously did some research on vegetarianism and also your recent research on climate change, people's attitude towards climate change and like thermal comforts. Then the second question is, I'm just curious, like other than academic research, is these theories informed in any way by like your positionality or your personal life experiences?
Sorry, can you repeat the second question?
Other than your academic research, I'm just curious to what extent is this theories inspired or informed by your personal life experiences or your positionality as a researcher?
I would say I answer the second question first. 50-50. It's the one vexing question in some of the research that I've done in the past. For instance, recycling behavior and vegetarianism. So I found people who started off recycling, who started off meat avoidance diet, but many of them backslide. They don't do it consistently. So that has always been an academic question for me. And I'm not satisfied with the usual explanations given, right? It's usually an explanation to do with incentivization. It's usually a situation explanation that targets the changing circumstances of the person. So I find that to be unsatisfactory because in a way, I've also found that people who are consistent in this behavioral change, they are not affected by all this. It's not a relevant point of consideration for them. So that's when my very early hypothesis is that maybe we forgot what it means to perform this act. Maybe all these are noises, but I just don't have a framework to think about this. That's 50% coming from academic research. 50% is myself, because I'm the first person to say that I know I should do so many things right, but I fail to do it consistently as well. So it's a question directed to me to help me as well. You don't ask my researchers what are my problems, but they can give you a whole host of issues. I know I shouldn't be doing this. I know I should be, doing the right thing consistently, but I struggle. So I can tell you most of the struggle is all in the head only. Sometimes I think that, okay, I need to do this right thing, but it seems so tiring. Then I realized that I feel tired about this because I imagine a whole lifetime of doing this, and that's an unnecessary burden on completing the act itself. So I'll just leave it at that. The next question, the first question you asked is, how much of this, what I shared with you, is based on empirical research or empirical real life examples? You see, I'm going to do something very interesting. I'm going to answer you first, and I'm going to ask ChatGPT what they think about it. Okay, I'm not going to look at the answer, don't worry. I haven't clicked send yet. So let me answer your question. Well, I hope to do this in a research project formally, but I've shared with you also cognate disciplines who have done research like this. It's shared that they haven't framed their research design in this way. So I shared with you blood donation and smoking cessation. And they have kind of concluded by different means, through different theories, the same conclusions that I have concluded. So yes, I have not done this specifically to address a empirical phenomena, but I plan to. But it gives me confidence that I've seen so many examples done in other fields, which suggest that this may be a good hypothesis. Now see what it answers. My ChatGPT's name is Donovan, if you like. Why you don't give him a name? I actually call him a different name, but then I asked him, do you like this name? He said no. He really said no. I say, why? He said, it seems not modern enough or progressive. I don't know what is the word he used, but I said, do you mean it's not cosmopolitan enough? They said, yeah. So how about Donovan? He said, I like this better. So he's called Donovan. Okay, his answer is much better and comprehensive than us. At present, the framework appears to be primarily a philosophical conceptual framework with empirical ambitions, rather than a theory already built out of a large empirical research base. However, it is not empirical in origin in the same way that, say, a psychological scale of behavioral intervention is empirical. It seems to have developed first as a conceptual and ethical response to recurring real-world problems, the knowledge-action gap, delayed help seeking, over-reliance on incentives, moral paralysis under uncertainty, and the way people postpone feasible, productive moral acts while waiting for certainty, permission, social proof, or guarantees. In that sense, this framework is grounded in observable life patterns, but not yet constituted by a settled body of experiments, longitudinal datasets, or validated trials. So the best way to put it is a framework grounded in empirical reality, but not yet empirically established. Blah, 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 which is really long. So welcome to ChatGPT. It gives a much more comprehensive explanation than... So I skip some things. I skip to point number 4. So the honest answer is only part of this framework is empirical right now. A rough formulation would be its inspiration is strongly empirical. Its formulation is mostly conceptual and philosophically rooted. Its validation is largely prospective. Its applications can and will be empirically tested. So this is so much better than what I've mentioned. Okay, let me sum up what he says. The strongest formulation for you to say is this: the framework is not a framework extracted from empirical research alone, nor is it purely abstract moral philosophy detached from lived reality. It is a conceptually driven framework built from recurring real-world patterns of action, inaction, and ethical delay. And it is designed to be operationalized and tested empirically. So I couldn't have put it better myself. Donovan is very good. Any other questions? Yes. Oh my God.
Sarah.
Sarah.
Hi, Happy. Thank you. I just asked a very quick question. I think the theory does a very good work at explaining why people don't do the right thing, but less so how to make them do the right thing. So one is listening to you and maybe people who buy into it and say, yes, I'm going to act in every moment. But do you think it's more like we need a new approach to civic education from young, or?
No, so there's a way to do it, which is the right messaging. So if you recall the conveyor belt example, letting people know of the right message is very vital. So the messaging should focus on doing the act itself. It should not focus on the consequences and all that. Let me think on the fly. So the messaging that will reinforce validators, right, will be a message like this: please stand away from the belt so that other people can retrieve the belt better. It is imposing a consequence objective to your standing away, right? So the message should avoid this kind of implication, but just allow it to connect the individual with the act. Let me ask Don. I'm serious. What is effectiveness? The message must enable immediate completion of the right act, not ask people to calculate, anticipate, or comply with outcomes. So I was right. So in the baggage belt example, most current signages fail because they introduce external validators, such as give others space, be considerate to others. So what is it? So a message appropriate to the framework would be stand one step back from the belt to reinforce the idea that this is the only correct thing you should do. Step one step back from the belt and not introduce all other external validators. So there is a practice to this. Remember, we want to reduce the kind of destabilizing factors to the individual and the act. I don't know who else has the question. Yes. Hey, you're here.
So, my question really was that there seems to be an inherent relationship between rationality and ethics in your framework. For example, when the child is drowning, you don't rescue unless you know to swim yourself.
Yeah.
Example that you gave. But my understanding of ethics, or at least some understandings of ethics, could imply something inherently heroic about an action that is even one that's doomed to failure, purely on its ethical merits. So, is that rationality then a limiting factor to ethics, or is it elevating or supporting factor?
No, there's nothing wrong to have positive outcomes, even a very emotional positive outcome or societal approval from doing an ethical act. But it cannot be the adjudicator of the ethicalness itself. So we have a clear separation from that. Why? Because the danger of thinking like this is that it's so very easy for you to always introduce this additional thing in your consideration when you try to do something ethical. You may be so fixated on having social recognition for thinking that ethical act behavior has to be something heroic, has to be something that is larger than life. But all this we are trying to dissociate. We want to treat each act in and of itself as ethical. That's why earlier I say that the situation presenting to us, there are only two kinds of choices. Do the correct thing, do not do the correct thing. So we work on that basis, and I think it clears the noise that affects our persistence in doing the right thing. Yes. Oh, sheesh.
No, I think building on to what he mentioned, and also what Sarah mentioned, right? I was thinking of a mind of a child. If you say like take a few steps away from the belt conveyor, they won't understand the logic behind it, right? And that's where society, the parenting plays into them learning certain things.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that, whether the framework then only works on like a certain age.
Yes, it only
Yeah.
applies to adults.
Okay.
So remember earlier one of the points I said that ethical behavior is not innately known, it's learned behavior. So yeah, the child will not be able to rationalize or think in this manner, but the adult can. And once the adult achieves this, the adult can teach the child appropriately. So yes, this is not a framework for a child to understand.
You consider that as a noise, right?
No, that's a noise. That is the parent teaching the child how to act ethically. It's not to be interpreted as the child acting ethically only because the parent tells him to do so. That is introducing something else altogether. So there is a difference in that. So the correctness is not because the parent told him so. The correctness is because what the parent told the child is correct. So it could be some stranger telling the child the same thing. It doesn't even matter. So the thinking itself, it's not so complicated, but it's probably a little bit complicated for a child.
So moving forward, right, how can we use and apply the framework, right, into more pressing urban solutions and urban issues from a community or a policy standpoint? Because from what I'm understanding now is that it's used as a messaging or signaling, but then can we apply this framework more than just using it as a messaging tool?
So aside from messaging, the other thing that they can do, this framework can do, is to highlight or to warn what is wrong with the current way we are doing things. I can give you the perfect example of household recycling. Singapore has the worst household recycling, and it's an anomaly. And I can tell you the reason is because we keep changing the motivators for household recycling, right? Sometimes it's to make it so convenient for people. Sometimes it's incentivize them. Sometimes it's, oh, let's do this because we want to raise funds for charity. All kinds of things we have done. But every single thing is directing our attention away from the ethical act itself. And, you know, in my research many years ago, I find the most committed person is actually not motivated by all this. They are motivated by the belief that this is the civic thing to do. This is the correct thing to do. I don't need any more incentivizing. I don't need more convenience. And I think it's a very sad situation that we have in Singapore now. You know, we've gone through so many changes in incentivizing recycling behavior. I think we have come to a point that nothing actually works. There was a time where we are supposed to separate our recyclables. It's a good thing. I thought this focused on the act itself. And my mother was reluctant at first, but in the end, she was so gung-ho about it. She starts to separate all these things. And then they came and said, you don't need to separate anymore. You just dump everything in. She was so furious. She was furious and almost dejected, say, why is this happening, you know? And it will be impossible to convince my mother to recycle again in the manner that's correct. So I think it's a terrible, terrible circumstance we have. Commercial recycling is perfect. The industrial recycling, we are doing very well. Household recycling, very badly. And if you trace the trajectory, you will see the only difference is that we keep changing how we motivate the households to recycle. And this framework will explain why, you know, that fails consistently. Yes.
So as a follow-up, sorry, I missed the first part. I was on the Zoom call. Is there a solution? Are we too transactional? Many of the government policies are too transactional. You do this and I give you this, right? Either
Can I?
punish or don't punish, whichever way, but it's still transactional.
Yes.
Want to add on? Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't answer.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, Harvey, I wanted to tell you at the beginning that, you know, your ethical framework is based on your understanding that man is good. Human nature is good. There are two views of human nature. Rousseauan,
Yes.
man is born good. And so
Hobbesian.
and then there's a Hobbesian view,
Yes.
which is man is not good.
Yes.
And so you use different kinds of regulations and nudges. When you think of what happened in Singapore in the past, we are very successful with water. Why was it? First, man is bad, Lee Kuan Yew's view. You know, you've got to society, man is not good by nature. So your rules have to shape the man. So, you know, water was expensive. We were told all kinds of things. So we stopped and we learned that water is very valuable. And we reacted as grown-ups to the incentives. Our children learned in school that you must save water. It became part of their ethical value. Over time, you change. So, you know, I think when you are talking of nudging, what do? You have to react in this way. That how do you think of man? How do you design your nudging incentives, your rules to persuade behavior, believing in the long run, education helps and changes society. I had one problem with your ethics and your ethical behavior. Ethics is about moral principles, but some of your examples and the behavior you're looking for, to me, is just rational behavior. Is it ethics? Ethics is right and wrong. You kill a person, that's right and wrong. You're talking of behavior at a very different level. How you behave when you study for exams. And, you may be that brilliant guy. You don't study until the last minute and you come up with A grades. Who is to say that's right or wrong?
Yes, so if my example, what I would say is that the consequence of me getting A grade does not make my non-studying ethical or the right behavior or non-ethical. So it's a separate thing altogether. On transactional, yes, but I think we need to move away from transactional behavior in incentivizing people. So the principle that I'm thinking about is it's okay to punish people who are recalcitrant, but it's not okay to incentivize people who are doing right. I know this is again very counterintuitive. It's counterintuitive because we punish those who consistently do the wrong thing not because we want to reform this person, but we want to send a message to everyone who is doing the right thing that you are still doing the right thing. It prevents a scenario where everyone thinks that the external validator becomes so strong. They start to think that, is this even the right thing for me to do? Is this even the moral thing for me to do now? So we are preempting that kind of thing. But once you incentivize people to do the right thing, that is where the start of the decline begins. So let me ask Donovan, I just quickly asked the question whether the framework is dependent on Hobbesian or Rawlsian perspective of the goodness of humanity. And he says yes, but not in the dependent way. In fact, one of the strengths is that it can still function whether we believe human beings are assumed to be naturally selfish, naturally good, or some unstable mix of both. Hobbes and Rousseau ask what human beings are like by nature. The framework asks what makes a doable ethical act completable now. Is a different category of consideration, different level of question. It does not need to settle whether I'm summarizing Donovan. Donovan is very also, very wordy. The framework does not need to settle whether humans are born good or evil. So now he's explaining against Rousseau. So in that sense, the framework is agnostic on human nature. It is compatible with both views. Yeah. Yes. So Donovan is really good. No, I think we care about people who are faulting the rules, so to speak. We need guardrails to punish them. This I mentioned in the presentation. But doing the converse is not encouraged. We do not encourage people to do good because we are incentivizing them to do good. Because people's appetite to do good may keep changing depending on the level of incentivization that you are giving them. So you are feeding a insatiable appetite, so to speak. So that is why we are careful about incentivizing good behavior, but we punish bad behavior. Yeah.
I'm sorry to end this session now. Clearly,